Which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? Researchers and conservationists stress that biodiversity loss due to invasive species is blank. For example, people can take simple steps such as washing their footwear after travel to avoid introducing potentially invasive organisms into new environments. So answer choice A says preventable. This seems to be correct because the second sentence highlights how biodiversity loss due to invasive species can be avoided or stopped. So A seems to be the correct answer. B, undeniable. This is incorrect because the second sentence doesn't highlight how biodiversity loss due to invasive species is undeniable or that it can't be denied. C, common. This is incorrect because, like B, the second sentence doesn't discuss how biodiversity loss due to invasive species is common or that it occurs regularly. Rather, it discusses how biodiversity loss can be avoided or stopped. D, concerning. This is incorrect because although the second sentence implies that biodiversity loss due to invasive species is concerning, it more so focuses on how it can be avoided. So D is incorrect, and the correct choice is A. Which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? It is by no means blank to recognize the influence of Dutch painter Hieronymus Bosch on Ali Benisadr's paintings. Indeed, Benisadr himself cites Bosch as an inspiration. However, some scholars have suggested that the ancient Mesopotamian work, Epic of Gilgamesh, may have had a far greater impact on Benisadr's work. A, substantial. This is incorrect because substantial would imply that it's not substantial to recognize the influence of Bosch on Benisadr's paintings. But the phrase here, indeed Benisadr himself cites Bosch as an inspiration, disproves that. So A is incorrect. B, satisfying. This is incorrect because the whole text isn't talking about satisfaction. C, unimportant. This seems to be correct because it would imply that it's not unimportant to recognize the influence of Bosch on Benisadr's paintings, and the second sentence reaffirms this by saying that although it's not important, this other work may have had more influence on Benisadr's paintings. So C seems to be the correct answer. D, appropriate. This is incorrect for the same reason as A, because it implies that it's not appropriate to recognize the influence of Bosch on Benisadr's paintings, but the phrase, indeed Benisadr himself cites Bosch as an inspiration, disproves that. So D is incorrect, meaning the correct choice is C, unimportant. Which choice best describes the function of the second sentence and the overall structure of the text? Astronomers are confident that the star Betelgeuse will eventually consume all the helium in its core and explode in a supernova. They are much less confident, however, about when this will happen, since that depends on internal characteristics of Betelgeuse that are largely unknown. Astrophysicist Serafina El-Badri Nance and colleagues recently investigated whether acoustic waves in the star could be used to determine internal stellar states, but concluded that this method could not sufficiently reveal Betelgeuse's internal characteristics to allow its evolutionary state to be firmly fixed. So option A says it explains how the work of Nance and colleagues was received by others in the field. Sentence 2 doesn't discuss how others in the field received the work of Nance and colleagues, and it doesn't introduce Nance and colleagues yet, so A is wrong. B, it presents a central finding reported by Nance and colleagues. The central finding is seen in sentence 3, where it says that the method they used couldn't sufficiently reveal Betelgeuse's internal characteristics. And instead, the second sentence discusses the problem, which is that they didn't know the internal characteristics of Betelgeuse. So B is wrong. C, it identifies the problem that Nance and colleagues attempted to solve but did not. This is correct because second sentence shows that the problem is that they didn't know the internal characteristics of Betelgeuse, and that they investigated whether they could use acoustic waves in the star to determine internal stellar states, but this method couldn't reveal Betelgeuse's internal characteristics. So C seems to be correct. And D, it describes a serious limitation of the method used by Nance and colleagues. Sentence 2 doesn't even introduce Nance and colleagues yet, so D can't be correct. So C is the correct answer. Which choice best describes the function of the third sentence and the overall structure of the text? The mimosa tree evolved in East Asia, where the beetle, Orchideus tyrannus preys on its seeds. In 1785, mimosa trees were introduced to North America far from any B. tyrannus, but evolutionary links between predators and their prey can persist across centuries and continents. Around 2001, B. tyrannus was introduced in southeastern North America, near where botanist Xu Mei Cheng and colleagues had been monitoring mimosa trees. Within a year, 93% of the trees had been attacked by the beetles. So the third sentence says, but evolutionary links between predators and their prey can persist across centuries and continents. And option A says, it states that the hypothesis that Chang and colleagues had set out to investigate using mimosa trees and B. tyrannus. So this is incorrect because Chang and colleagues had been monitoring the mimosa trees. They didn't make a hypothesis about them. B. It presents a generalization that is exemplified by the discussion of mimosa trees and B. tyrannus. This seems correct because the mimosa trees back in East Asia were attacked by B. tyrannus, and when these mimosa trees were introduced to North America, and so were B. tyrannus, the mimosa trees were again attacked by the beetles. And this shows how the evolutionary links between predators and their prey can persist across centuries and continents. In this case, continents. So B seems the correct answer. C. It offers an alternative explanation for the findings of Chang and colleagues. The text doesn't include an explanation for the findings of Chang and colleagues, so C is incorrect. D. It provides context that clarifies why the species mentioned spread to new locations. But this is incorrect because the sentence, but evolutionary links between predators and their prey can persist across centuries and continents, is a generalization. It doesn't mention a specific species. So B is correct. Based on the text, how would Focarelli and Panetta, text 2, most likely respond to Fan's findings, text 1? When companies in the same industry propose merging with one another, they often claim that the merger will benefit consumers by increasing efficiency and therefore lowering prices. Economist Ying Fan investigated this notion in the context of the United States newspaper market. She modeled a hypothetical merger of Minneapolis area newspapers and found that subscription prices would rise following a merger. Text 1 shows that if a company were to merge with other companies, the subscription prices would rise, meaning that it would be disadvantage for the consumers. Text 2. Economists Dario Focarelli and Fabio Panetta have argued that research on the effect of mergers on prices have focused excessively on short-term effects, which tend to be adverse for consumers. Using the case of consumer banking in Italy, they show that over the long term, several years of their study, the efficiency gains realized by merged companies do result in economic benefits for consumers. So text 2 shows that over the long term, several years maybe, that there would be efficiency gains from merged companies, and that would result in economic benefits for consumers. So option A says they would argue that over the long term, the expenses incurred by the merged newspaper company will also increase. This is incorrect because right here it says the efficiency gains realized by the merged companies do result in economic benefits for consumers, meaning that the merged companies would see a decrease in their expenses, not an increase. B. They would recommend that Fan compare the near-term effect of a merger on subscription prices in the Minneapolis area with the effect of a merger in another newspaper market. This is incorrect because the economists in text 2 focused on time, not on location. C. They would encourage Fan to investigate whether the projected effect on subscription prices persists over an extended period. This seems to be correct because the economists did focus on time, and they found that over a long time, an extended period, there would be efficiency gains for merged companies. So C seems to be the correct answer. D. They would claim that mergers have a different effect on consumer prices in the newspaper industry than in most other industries. This is incorrect because the economists in text 2 focused on time, not on the different industries. And they generalized that every merged company over a long period of time has economic benefits for consumers. So D is wrong, and C is the correct answer. According to the text, what is true about Eleanor? The following text is from Jane Austen's 1811 novel, Sense and Sensibility. Eleanor lives with her younger sisters and her mother, Mrs. Dashwood. Eleanor, this eldest daughter whose advice was so effectual, possessed the strength of understanding and coolness of judgment which qualified her, though only 19, to be the counsellor of her mother and enabled her frequently to counteract, to the advantage of them all, that eagerness of mind in Mrs. Dashwood, which must generally have led to imprudence. She had an excellent heart, her disposition was affectionate, and her feelings were strong, but she knew how to govern them. It was a knowledge of which her mother had yet to learn, and which one of her sisters had resolved never to be taught. So, option A says, Eleanor often argues with her mother, but fails to change her mind. This is incorrect because in the text, it does say that she was the counselor of her mother and frequently counteracted her. It doesn't say that she argued with her mother and failed to change her mind. B. Eleanor can be overly sensitive with regard to family matters. Here it says that her feelings were strong, but that she knew how to govern them, and she doesn't say that she was overly sensitive with regard to family matters. C. Eleanor thinks her mother is a bad role model. This is incorrect because in the text it didn't say anywhere what Eleanor thought of her mother. D. Eleanor is relatively mature for her age. This is correct because here it lists a number of qualities of Eleanor, and then it says though only 19, emphasizing how she was so young, but she had these mature qualities. So D is the correct option. Based on the text, what is true about Miss Ochiltree's acquaintances? The following text is adapted from Charles W. Chesnutt's 1901 novel, The Mare of Tradition. Miss Ochiltree was a woman of strong individuality, whose comments upon her acquaintances, present or absent, were marked by a frankness at times no less than startling. This characteristic caused her to be more or less avoided. Miss Ochiltree was aware of this sentiment on the part of her acquaintances, and rather exulted in it. So option A says they try to refrain from discussing topics that would upset Miss Ochiltree. This is incorrect because in the text it didn't say that her acquaintances refrained from discussing topics that would upset her. It says that they just avoided Miss Ochiltree. So A is incorrect. B. They are unable to spend as much time with Miss Ochiltree as she would like. This is incorrect because in the passage it doesn't say that Miss Ochiltree would like to spend more time with her acquaintances. Rather, it says that she knew that her acquaintances avoided her and that she exulted in it, which means that she liked it. C. They are too preoccupied with their own concerns to speak with Miss Ochiltree. This is incorrect because in the text it didn't say that her acquaintances were preoccupied with their own concerns. Rather, it just says that they avoided her. D. They are likely offended by what Miss Ochiltree has said about them. This makes sense because it says that Miss Ochiltree's comments about her acquaintances were marked by a frankness that at times was startling, and this characteristic caused her to be more or less avoided by her acquaintances. So it would make sense that because her comments were startling, and that her acquaintances avoided her, that they were offended by what Miss Ochiltree had said about them. So D is the correct answer. What is the main idea of the text? The following text is adapted from William Shakespeare's 1609 poem, Sonnet 27. The poem is addressed to a close friend as if he were physically present. Weary with toil, I hurry to my bed. The dear repose for limbs would travel tired. But then begins a journey in my head, to work my mind when body's work's expired. For then my thoughts, from far where I abide, begin a zealous pilgrimage to thee, and keep my drooling eyelids open wide. So choice A says, the speaker is asleep and dreaming about traveling to see the friend. This is incorrect, because the speaker is awake, seen here when it says that he's about to go to sleep, but then he begins thinking about his friend. And at the end of the poem it says, and keep my drooping eyelids open wide, meaning that these thoughts about his friend keep him from sleeping. B. The speaker is planning an upcoming trip to the friend's house. This is incorrect, because the speaker isn't planning a literal trip to his friend's house. it's more of a metaphor for him thinking about his friend. C. The speaker is too fatigued to continue discussion with a friend. This is incorrect because the friend isn't actually here. The speaker's thinking about his friend. D. The speaker is thinking about the friend instead of immediately falling asleep. This is correct because here it says that he's about to go to sleep, but then he begins thinking about his friend. And at the end, it also proves this by showing how these thoughts keep him from sleeping, that he's still awake. So D is the correct choice. Which finding from Granado and Alvarez's research, if true, would most directly support their claim? Black beans are a nutritionally dense food, but they are difficult to digest, in part because of their high levels of soluble fiber and compounds like raffinose. They also contain anti-nutrients like tannins and trypsin inhibitors, which interfere with the body's ability to extract nutrients from foods. In a research article, Marileso Granito and Glenda Alvarez from Simón Bolívar University in Venezuela claim that inducing fermentation of black beans using lactic acid bacteria improves the digestibility of the beans and makes them more nutritious. So the claim here is that fermenting the black beans improves their digestibility and makes them more nutritious. So answer choice A says, when cooked, fermented beans contain significantly more trypsin inhibitors and tannins, with significantly less soluble fiber and raffinose than non-fermented beans. So this is incorrect because tannins and trypsin inhibitors are shown to interfere with the body's ability to extract nutrients from foods, meaning that the beans having more of these trypsin inhibitors, tannins, would make the beans less nutritious. So A is incorrect. B. Fermented beans contain significantly less soluble fiber and raffinose than non-fermented beans, and when cooked, the fermented beans also displayed a significant reduction in trypsin inhibitors and tannins. So this seems to be correct, because it says here that the beans are difficult to digest because of their high levels of soluble fiber and compounds like raffinose. So a reduction in the amount of soluble fiber and raffinose would make them easier to digest. And when cooked, the beans also displayed a significant reduction in trypsin inhibitors and tannins. So, like as before, the tannins and trypsin inhibitors interfere with the body's ability to extract nutrients from foods. So a reduction in tannins and trypsin inhibitors would mean that the beans would be more nutritious. So A seems to be the correct choice. C. When the fermented beans were analyzed, they were found to contain two microorganisms, Lactobacillus cesae and Lactobacillus plantarum, that are theorized to increase the amount of nitrogen absorbed by the gut after eating beans. So this is wrong, because it doesn't say in the passage anything about nitrogen and how it affects the nutrient intake or the digestibility of the beans. So the fact that the nitrogen intake is increased by the gut after eating these beans is unrelated. D. Both fermented and non-fermented black beans contain significantly fewer trypsin inhibitors and tannins after being cooked at high pressure. This is incorrect because it doesn't differentiate between fermented and non-fermented black beans, meaning that it doesn't show that fermenting the beans makes them more digestible and more nutritious. So D is incorrect, and B is the correct choice. Which choice most effectively uses data from the table to complete the example? Earth's atmosphere is bombarded by cosmic dust originating from several sources: short-period comets, SPCs, particles from the asteroid belt, ASTs, Halley-type comets, HTCs, and Oort cloud comets, OCCs. Some of the dust's material vaporizes in the atmosphere in a process called ablation, and the faster the particles move, the higher the rate of ablation. Astrophysicist Juan Diego Carrillo Sanchez led a team that calculated average ablation rates for elements in the dust, such as iron and potassium, and showed that material in slower-moving SPC or AST dust at a lower rate than the same material in a faster-moving HTC or OCC dust. For example, whereas the average ablation rate for iron from AST dust is 28%, average rate for blank. So, right off the bat, we can eliminate B and D, because it says here that comparing material in SPC or AST dust has a lower rate than the same material in HTC or OCC dust. So the example uses iron here, so the comparing it with something else, it must also be iron. So sodium cannot be compared to. And so between A and C, C is the correct choice, because here it says that SPC or AST dust has a lower rate than material in HTC or OCC dust. And this example serves to show a contrast between iron and a slow-moving material like AST dust with a faster-moving one like HTC or OCC. And here it says that iron from HTC dust is 90%, so C is the correct choice. Which choice most effectively uses data from the graph to illustrate the claim? High levels of public uncertainty about which economic policies a country will adopt can make planning difficult for businesses, but measures of such uncertainty have not tended to be very detailed. Recently, however, economist Sandil Helishwaido analyzed trends in news reports to derive measures not only for general economic policy uncertainty, but also for uncertainty related to specific areas of economic policy, like tax or trade policy. One revelation of her work is that a general measure may not fully reflect uncertainty about specific areas of policy, as in the case of the United Kingdom, where general economic policy uncertainty blank A aligned closely with uncertainty about tax and public spending policy in 2005, but differed from uncertainty about tax and public spending policy by a large amount in 2009. So this graph shows that the gray bar represents tax and public spending policy, the white bar represents trade policy, and the black bar represents general economic policy. And answer choice A says that general economic policy uncertainty aligned closely with uncertainty about tax and public spending policy in 2005. This is correct, because the black bar, general economic policy, is very close to the gray bar, tax and public spending policy. But the second part, general economic policy uncertainty, differed from uncertainty about tax and public spending policy by a large amount in 2009, is incorrect, because in 2009 the black bar, general economic policy, is very close to the gray bar, tax and public spending policy, so A is incorrect. B was substantially lower than uncertainty about tax and public spending policy each year from 2005 to 2010. So this is saying that general economic policy uncertainty was lower than tax and public spending policy for each year from 2005 to 2010. But this is incorrect, because in the year 2006, 2007, and 2009, the black bar is greater than the gray bar, meaning that general economic policy was greater than tax and public spending policy uncertainty in these years. So B is incorrect. C reached its highest level between 2005 and 2010, in the same year that uncertainty about trade policy and tax and public spending policy reached their lowest levels. This is incorrect, because the year that general economic policy uncertainty reached its highest levels was 2010. And in the same year, the tax and public spending policy also reached its highest level, not its lowest level. So C is incorrect. D was substantially lower than uncertainty about trade policy in 2005, and substantially higher than uncertainty about trade policy in 2010. So this is saying that general economic policy was lower than uncertainty about trade policy in 2005. And this is correct, because the black bar is smaller than the white bar representing trade policy, and the black general economic policy. And the second part, the general economic policy, was substantially higher than uncertainty about trade policy in 2010. This is correct also, because the black bar is far taller than the white bar in 2010. So D is the correct choice. Which choice best describes data from the table that supports the researcher's hypothesis? When hibernating, Alaska marmots and Arctic ground squirrels enter a state called torpor, which minimizes the energy their bodies need to function. Often, a hibernating animal will temporarily come out of torpor, called an arousal episode, and its metabolic rate will rise, burning more of the precious energy the animal needs to survive the winter. Alaska marmots hibernate in groups, and therefore burn less energy keeping warm during these episodes than they would if they were alone. A researcher hypothesized that because Arctic ground squirrels hibernate alone, they likely exhibit longer bouts of torpor and shorter arousal episodes than Alaska marmots. So this table here shows Alaska marmots and Arctic ground squirrels comparing their torpor bouts, duration per bout in days, arousal episodes, and duration per episode. And the claim here is that the because the Arctic ground squirrel hibernates alone, they would have longer bouts of torpor, which would compare these values, and shorter arousal episodes than Alaska marmots, which would be comparing these values. So choice A says, the Alaska marmot's arousal episode lasts for days, while the Arctic ground squirrel's arousal episode lasts for less than a day. This is incorrect for two reasons. One, the hypothesis is about both the length of the bouts of torpor and the length of the arousal episodes. But this option A only discusses the length of arousal episode. And also because the information here is wrong. It's saying that the Alaska marmot's arousal episode lasted for days, whereas it's only lasting for 21.2 hours, which is less than a day. B. Alaska marmots and the Arctic ground squirrels both maintain torpor for several consecutive days per bout on average. So this is incorrect because, like A, it only discusses the bouts of torpor, not talking about arousal episodes. C. Alaska marmots had shorter torpor bouts and longer arousal episodes than the Arctic ground squirrels did. So this is saying that the Alaska marmots had shorter torpor bouts, which is true because they had 13.81 days of torpor bouts, while the Arctic ground squirrels had 16.77 days, and longer arousal episodes, which is also true because their arousal episodes were 21.2 hours, whereas the ground squirrel was only 14.2 hours. So C seems to be the correct answer. D. Alaska marmots had more torpor bouts than arousal episodes, but their arousal episodes were much shorter than their torpor bouts. This is incorrect because the hypothesis compares the Arctic ground squirrels with Alaska marmots, whereas this option only discusses the Alaska marmots. So D is incorrect, and C is the correct choice. Which choice most effectively uses data from the table to complete the statement? Over the past 200 years, the percentage of the population employed in the agriculture sector has declined in both France and the United States, while employment in the service sector, which includes jobs in retail, consulting, real estate, etc., has risen. However, this transition happened at very different rates in the two countries. This can be seen most clearly by comparing the employment by sector in both countries in blank. So this table here shows the agriculture, manufacturing, and services in France and in the United States from the year 1800 to 2012. And it asks us to find 2 years where the rates are very different for the two countries. The rate is the movement from agriculture to services. So A here says 1900 was employment by sector in 1950. So agriculture in France in 1900 was at 43%, and in 1950 it was at 32%, which is 11% decrease. Services in France were at 28% in 1900, and in 1950 it was at 35%, so a 7% increase. In the United States, agriculture in 1900 was at 41%, in 1950 14%, so this is a 27% decrease compared to France's 11% decrease. And services in 1900 was at 31%, and in 1950 was at 53%. So services increased by 21% compared to France's 7%, which is 3 times greater. So A definitely seems like it could be the correct choice. B. 1800 was employment by sector in 2012. So in 1800, agriculture in France was at 64%, 2012 it was at 3%, so 61% decrease. Services in France in 1800 was at 14%, 2012 76%, so this is a 62% increase. And agriculture in the US in 1800 was at 68%, in 2012 2%, so 66% decrease. Services in 1800 was at 13%, and in 2012 it was at 80%, so this is a 67% increase. So comparing these numbers, 61% increase in agriculture for France, and agriculture for US, 66% decrease. So these numbers look to be very similar, so B is not correct. C. 1900 was employment by sector in 2012. So in 1900, agriculture in France was at 43%, 2012, 3%, so 40% decrease. Services were at 28% in 1900 for France, and 2012 it was at 76%, so this is a 48% increase. Agriculture in the US in the 1900s was at 41%, 2012 2%, so this is a 39% decrease. So comparing these numbers, you can see the 40% decrease in agriculture for France and the 39% decrease in agriculture for US between these 2 years means that their rates are very similar, which is not what we're looking for. D. 1800 with employment by sector in 1900. So in 1800, France was at 64%, 1900 it was at 43%. So this is a 21% decrease. Services in France, 14%, 1900 it was at 28%, so 14% increase. Agriculture in the US, 68% in 1800, and 1900 is at 41%. So this is a 27% decrease. France is at a 21% decrease. So this looks to be very similar. So this is also incorrect, meaning A is the correct answer choice. Which choice most logically completes the text? Euphorbia isula leafy spurge is a reagent plant that has become invasive in North America, where it displaces native vegetation and sickens cattle. E. isula can be controlled with chemical herbicides, but that approach can also kill harmless plants nearby. Recent research on introducing engineered DNA into plant species to inhibit their reproduction may offer a path toward exclusively targeting E. isula, consequently blank. So option A says making individual E. isula plants more susceptible to existing chemical herbicides. This is incorrect because the engineered DNA would inhibit the reproduction of E. isula and exclusively target the E. isula, meaning that it would limit the numbers of E. isula without harming other plants, so there would be no need for chemical herbicides. B. Enhancing the ecological benefits of E. isula in North America. This is incorrect because the text doesn't describe any ecological benefits of E. isula, and inhibiting their reproduction would mean reducing their numbers, and reducing their numbers wouldn't enhance their ecological benefits. C. Enabling cattle to consume E. isula without becoming sick. This is wrong for the same reason as B, because inhibiting their reproduction would mean reducing their numbers, and reducing the amount of E. isula wouldn't enable cattle to consume it. D. Reducing invasive E. isula numbers without harming other organisms. This is correct because the chemical herbicides would control the E. isula population, but would also kill plants nearby. But the engineered DNA would inhibit the reproduction of E. isula, which would exclusively target E. isula, meaning that it would limit the population of E. isula without harming other plants. So D is correct. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? Both Sona Karapotra, an Indian American, and Doniel Clayton, an African American, grew up frustrated by the lack of diverse characters in books for young people. In 2011, these two writers joined forces to found Cake Literacy, a book packaging blank specializes in the creation and promotion of stories told from diverse perspectives for children and young adults. So choice A says company, comma. This is incorrect because there's no need for comma here, and it's missing a connecting pronoun. B. Company that. This is correct because there's no need for a comma, and it has a connecting pronoun, that. So B seems to be the correct choice. C. Company. This is incorrect because it's missing the connecting pronoun, and in this case it should be that. And if you were to put this in to the blank, you could clearly see that it doesn't make sense. D. Company, comma, that. This is incorrect because there's no need for a comma between company and that. This is one phrase, so there's no need for a comma. So B is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? In 1930, Japanese-American artist Chihiro Obata depicted the natural beauty of Yosemite National Park in two memorable woodcuts, Evening at Carl Inn and Lake Bassin in the High Sierra. In 2019, Blank exhibited alongside 150 of Obata's other works in a single artist show at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. So, choice A says it was. This is incorrect because the singular pronoun it doesn't agree with the plural antecedent woodcuts. B. They were. This seems to be correct because the plural pronoun they agrees with the plural antecedent woodcuts. C. This was. This is incorrect for the same reason as A, because the singular pronoun this doesn't agree with the plural antecedent woodcuts. D. Somewhere. This is incorrect because it would be illogical to say some of two woodcuts. So D is incorrect, and B is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? American writer Edgewick Danticat, who emigrated from Haiti in 1981, has won acclaim for her powerful short stories, novels, and blank. Her lyrical yet unflinching depictions of her native country's turbulent history. Writer Robert Antonio has compared Danticat to Nobel Prize-winning novelist Toni Morrison. So option A says, essays, praising. This is incorrect because this results in a comma splice, where a comma is simply put between two independent clauses. B. Essays and praising. This is incorrect because a conjunction can't connect two independent clauses without a comma before it. C. Essays praising. This is incorrect because this is now a run-on sentence. There needs to be a comma with a conjunction, or the sentence needs to be split into two. D. Essays praising. This is correct because it properly creates two sentences, and the second sentence as well is created with a participle phrase that makes sense, because it says praising her lyrical yet unflinching depictions of her native country's turbulent history. So D is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? In 1966, Emmett Ashford became the first African American to umpire a Major League Baseball game. His energetic gestures announcing when a player had struck out, and his habit of barreling after a hit to see if it would land out of blank, transformed the traditionally solemn umpire role into a dynamic one. So enter choice. So the key part of this is the aspect of a finite verb. A finite verb is a verb that has a subject and establishes the tense. So the proper tense here would be past tense, and there are only two options here that has correct past tense, A and C. So both B and D are incorrect, which both have a present tense. So between A and C, A is correct because it properly establishes a finite verb, helped, that establishes the subject and establishes the tense, which is in past tense. C is incorrect because it includes that, which when included would make the sentence illogical. So A is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? In crafting her fantasy fiction, Nigerian-born British author Helen Oyeyemi has drawn inspiration from the classic 19th century fairy tale of the Brothers Grimm. Her 2014 novel, Boy, Snow, Bird, for instance, is a complex retelling of the story of Snow White, while her 2019 novel, Blink, offers a delicious twist on the classic tale of Hansel and Gretel. So the key rule here is that when a subject, her 2019 novel, Gingerbread, is followed by a verb, offers, there's no need for any punctuation. So there's no need for any dash, comma, or colon. The proper answer here would be C, no punctuation at all. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? The violins handmade in the 17th century by Italian craftsman Antonio Stradivari have been celebrated as some of the finest in the world. In close collaboration with musicians, Stradivari introduced changes to the shape of a traditional violin, flattening some of the instrument's curves and making blank lighter overall. So choice A says those. This is incorrect because the plural pronoun those doesn't agree with the singular antecedent violin. B. 1. This is incorrect because this would leave ambiguous what was made lighter, the violin or the curves. C. Them. This is incorrect because the plural pronoun them doesn't agree with the singular antecedent violin. D. It. This is correct because the singular pronoun it agrees with the singular antecedent violin. So D is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? During the English neoclassical period, 1660 to 1789, many writers imitated the epic poetry and satires of ancient Greece and Rome. They are not the first in England to adopt the literary mode of classical blank. Some of the most prominent figures of the earlier Renaissance period were also influenced by ancient Greek and Roman literature. A. Antiquity, however. This is incorrect because there is no punctuation after however to separate the two independent clauses. B. Antiquity, however, This is incorrect because the comma after however cannot be used to separate the two independent clauses in this manner. C. Antiquity, however, semicolon. This seems to be correct because the comma before however is used properly to separate the independent clause from the phrase that modifies it, and the semicolon after however is used properly to separate the two independent clauses. So C seems to be the correct answer. D. Antiquity, semicolon, however, This is incorrect because the however is illogically placed in the second independent clause, whereas it should be placed in the first independent clause. So D is incorrect, and C is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text with the most logical transition? One poll taken after the first 1960 presidential debate suggested that John Kennedy lost badly. Only 21% of those who listened on the radio rated him the winner. Blank. The debate was ultimately considered a victory for the telegenic young senator, who rated it higher than his opponent, Vice President Richard Nixon, among those watching on the new medium of television. This passage is saying that on one poll on radio, John Kennedy lost badly. Only 21% of people rated him the winner, but he ultimately won the debate by rating higher on television. So these two sentences contrast each other, and the transition word here must emphasize this contrast. A. In other words. This is incorrect because it's saying that the claim in this sentence, the second sentence, is based off data in the first one, but this is incorrect because the two sentences contrast each other. So A is incorrect. B. Therefore. This is incorrect for the same reason as A, because therefore would mean that the claim in this second sentence is based off the data in the first one, but that's not true because the two sentences contrast each other. C. Likewise. This is incorrect because this would compare the two sentences, but these two sentences contrast each other, not compare. D. Nevertheless. This is correct because it's suggesting that despite losing the poll on the radio, he ultimately won the debate, which follows with what the passage is saying. So D is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text with the most logical transition? In November 1934, Amrita Shergill was living in what must have seemed like the ideal city for a young artist, Paris. She was studying firsthand the color-saturated style of France's modernist masters, and beginning to make a name for herself as a painter. Blank. Shergill longed to return to her childhood home of India. Only there, she believed, could her art truly flourish. So the first sentence discusses Paris and its attributes and how it's good for a young artist, where she could learn from master artists and she could make a name for herself as a painter. But the second sentence discusses how she wanted to return to India, where she believed her art could truly flourish. So there's a contrast between these two sentences, and the transition word here must emphasize this contrast. A. Still. This makes sense here because it would highlight how despite Paris being a great place for her as an artist, she wanted to return to India, where she believed her art could truly flourish. So A seems to be the correct answer. B. Therefore. This is incorrect because therefore would mean that this discussion in the second sentence would be a consequence of the descriptions in the first sentence, but this is incorrect because the two sentences contrast each other. So B is incorrect. C. Indeed. This is incorrect because indeed adds emphasis to what was said before, but this is not what the two sentences do. Rather, they contrast each other. D. Furthermore. This is incorrect for the same reason as B, because furthermore, like therefore, emphasizes what was said in the first sentence, but this is not what occurs because these two sentences contrast each other. So A is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text with the most logical transition? In his 1925 book, The Morphology of Landscape, U.S. geographer Carl Saar challenged prevailing views about how natural landscapes influence human cultures. Blank, Saar argued that instead of being shaped entirely by their natural surroundings, cultures play an active role in their own development by virtue of their interaction with the environment. So the first sentence here highlights how Carl Saar challenged prevailing views. The second sentence goes into specifics about what his argument was. So the transition word between these two sentences must emphasize the relationship of these two sentences. A. Similarly. This is incorrect because similarly would imply that the second sentence is similar to the first one, but it's separate from it, which it is not, because the second sentence goes into the specifics of what was said in the first sentence. B. Finally. Finally would imply that the second sentence is like a last step, but we don't know whether it is, so finally wouldn't make sense here. C. Therefore. Therefore would imply that the second sentence is a result of the first sentence, but it's not. The second sentence goes into the specifics of the first sentence. D. Specifically. This seems to be correct, because specifically would imply that the second sentence goes into the specifics of the first one, which it does, where in the first sentence it says that Saar challenged prevailing views about how natural landscapes influence human cultures, and in the second sentence he states his argument, which is that instead of being shaped entirely by their natural surroundings, cultures play an active role in their own development. So D, specifically, is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text with the most logical transition? Although those who migrated to California in 1849 dreamed of finding gold nuggets in stream beds, the state's richest deposits were buried deeply in rock, beyond the reach of individual prospectors. Blank. By 1852, many had given up their fortune-hunting dreams and gone to work for one of the large companies capable of managing California's complex mining operations. So the first sentence here describes how many people migrated to California dreaming of finding gold nuggets, but these gold nuggets were buried deeply in rock, beyond the reach of individual prospectors. And the second sentence here shows that because of this, many workers had given up their dreams and worked for the larger mining companies capable of managing California's complex mining operations. So the transition between these two sentences must emphasize the consequence or result of the information in the first sentence. A. Furthermore. Furthermore is incorrect here, because furthermore would imply that the second sentence will discuss how the state's rich deposits were beyond the reach of individual prospectors, but this is incorrect, because the second sentence discusses how the prospectors gave up their dreams and went to work for the larger companies. B. Still. Still is incorrect, because still would imply that there's a contrast between the two sentences, when there's not, because the first sentence talks about how the rich deposits were buried deeply in rock. The second sentence talks about how, because of this, they gave up their dream and went to work for the mining operations. So B is incorrect. C. Consequently. Consequently makes sense here, because it makes sense that because the state's rich deposits were buried deeply in rock, and that this gold was inaccessible to individual prospectors, that they gave up their dreams and went to work for the California's complex mining operations. So C seems to be the correct answer. D. Next. Next is incorrect here, because next implies that the sentence will be the next step of a process, but this is incorrect, because there is no process. The second sentence simply is a result or a consequence of the information in the first sentence. So D is incorrect, and the answer is C. The student wants to present the Kwan Ho Kun study and its conclusions. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this goal? While researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. In 2013, archaeologists studied cat bone fragments they had found in the ruins of Kwan Ho Kun, a Chinese farming village. The fragments were estimated to be 5,300 years old. A chemical analysis of the fragments revealed that the cats had consumed large amounts of grain. The grain consumption is evidence that the Kwan Ho Kun cats may have been domesticated. A. As part of a 2013 study of cat domestication, a chemical analysis was conducted on cat bone fragments found in Kwan Ho Kun, China. This is incorrect, because this only presents information on the Kwan Ho Kun study and not its conclusions. B. A 2013 analysis of cat bone fragments found in Guanhukun, China, suggests that cats there may have been domesticated 5,300 years ago. This seems to be correct because it presents information on both the Guanhukun study and its conclusions. On the study, it says that the Guanhukun study was analysis of cat bone fragments found in Guanhukun, China, and its conclusion is that cats there may have been domesticated 5,300 years ago. So B seems to be the correct choice. C. In 2013, archaeologists studied what cats in Guanhukun, China had eaten more than 5,000 years ago. This, like A, is incorrect because it presents information only on the Guanhukun study, not its conclusions. D. Cat bone fragments estimated to be 5,300 years old were found in Guanhukun, China in 2013. This is incorrect for the same reason as C and A were incorrect, because it only presents information on the Guanhukun study, not its conclusions. So D is incorrect, meaning B is the correct choice.
The student wants to emphasize a difference in the origins of two words. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this goal? While researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. Started in 1925, the Scripps National Spelling Bee is a US-based spelling competition. The words used in the competition have diverse linguistic origins. In 2008, Samir Mishra won by correctly spelling the word guerdon. Guerdon derives from the Anglo-French word guerdon with a U. In 2009, Kavya Shiva Shankar won by correctly spelling the word Laodicean. Laodicean derives from the ancient Greek word Laodikeia. So, the student wants to emphasize a difference in the origin of the two words guerdon and Laodicean. So guerdon has an Anglo-French origin, while Laodicean has a Greek origin. So answer choice A says that guerdon, the final word of the 2008 Scripps National Spelling Bee, is of Anglo-French origin, while the following year's final word, Laodicean, derives from ancient Greek. So this answer choice seems good because it mentions that the word guerdon has an Anglo-French origin, while the following year's word has Greek origin. And the word while here emphasizes that one has an origin that is Anglo-French and then the other word has an origin that is Greek. So it's clearly contrasting between the two different origins of the two different words. Okay, so let's look at answer choice B. In 2008, Samir Mishra won the Scripps National Spelling Bee by correctly spelling the word guerdon. However, the following year, Kavya Shiva Shankar won based on spelling the word Laodicean. So B is not a good answer choice because the first part of the sentence is simply saying that he won by spelling the word guerdon and that she won by spelling the word Laodicean. It's not creating a contrast between the origins of the word, it's just creating a contrast between the words themselves. It should have mentioned that the origin of the word in 2008 was Anglo-French and that the origin of the word in the following year was Greek. So it's not creating a contrast between the origins of the words. It's creating, this answer choice is creating a contrast between the words themselves. So it's not a good answer choice. Answer choice C. Kavya Shiva Shankar won the 2009 Scripps National Spelling Bee by correctly spelling Laodicean, which derives from the ancient Greek word Laodikeia. Okay, this is not a good answer choice either, because this simply talks about one word, the word in 2009, and its origin. It should have also mentioned the word in the previous year and contrasted the origin of Laodicean with the origin of guerdon. But answer choice C did not do that. It only mentioned one word and its origin. So it's not emphasizing a difference between the origins of the two words. Okay, answer choice D says the Scripps National Spelling Bee uses words from diverse linguistic origins. such as Gurdon and Laodicean. So it does mention that these words have diverse origins for both Gurdon and Laodicean, but it doesn't emphasize the difference between the origins of these two words. It simply just says that the origins are diverse, not necessarily different. So answer choice A is much better than answer choice D because it says that the origin of Gurdon is Anglo-French, while the origin of Laodicean is Greek. So it's creating that emphasis on the origin of Gurdon and contrasting it with the origin of Laodicean very clearly, while answer choice D just mentions that they are diverse origins. So answer choice D is not very good, and answer choice A is the correct answer.
Which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? Choices are A. Overreacts, B. Reciprocates, C. Retaliates, and D. Deviates. In habitats with limited nutrients, certain fungus species grow on the roots of trees, engaging in mutually beneficial relationships known as ectomycorrhizae. In this symbiotic exchange, the tree provides the fungus with carbon, a nutrient necessary for both species, and the fungus, blank, by enhancing the tree's ability to absorb nitrogen, another key nutrient from the soil. So a key part of this is the fact that this relationship is symbiotic, meaning that it is mutually beneficial. So the tree provides the fungus with carbon, and the fungus gives back by enhancing the tree's ability to absorb nitrogen. So A, overreacts. This is incorrect because the fungus doesn't overreact by enhancing the tree's ability to absorb nitrogen. It gives back by enhancing the tree's ability to absorb nitrogen. So A is incorrect. B, reciprocates. This would make sense because the tree provides the fungus with carbon, and the fungus reciprocates by enhancing the tree's ability to absorb nitrogen, which helps establish the mutually beneficial relationship. So B seems to be the correct answer. C, retaliates. Retaliates is incorrect because it would imply that it harms or goes against it. But this is incorrect because this is a mutually beneficial relationship, so both help each other. So retaliates is incorrect. D, deviates. This is incorrect because deviates would imply that it strays away from, but as before, this is a mutually beneficial relationship, so both help each other. So deviates would be incorrect. And B, reciprocates is the correct answer. Which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? A, recognizable, B, intriguing, C, significant, and D, useful. Handedness, a preferential use of either the right or left hand, typically is easy to observe in humans. Because this trait is present but less blank in many other animals, animal behavior researchers often employ tasks specifically designed to reveal individual animals' preferences for a certain hand or paw. So option A says recognizable. This makes sense in the context of this text, where it says that it's easy to observe in humans, but this trait is less easy to observe in other animals, and that the researchers have to employ tasks to find out an animal's preferences for a hand or a paw. So A seems to be the correct choice. B, intriguing. Intriguing is incorrect here because the text doesn't imply anything about it being intriguing or not. The researchers are simply determining the individual animal's preferences for a hand or a paw. So B is incorrect. C, significant. Significant is incorrect for the same reason as B, because the text doesn't imply anything about being significant or not. D, useful. Like B and C, this is incorrect, because the text doesn't say anything about it being useful or not. It just shows that researchers are trying to find out the handedness for different animals. So D is incorrect, and A is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? A, responsiveness to, B, ambivalence toward, C, renunciation of, and D, mastery over. In Nature Poem 2017, Kumeyaay poet Tommy Pico portrays his blank, the natural world, by honoring the centrality of nature within his tribe's traditional beliefs, while simultaneously expressing his distaste for being in wilderness settings himself. So choice A says responsiveness to. This is incorrect because this would imply that he's quick to respond to nature, but that isn't supported by the text, because the text says that he honors the centrality of nature while also distastes being in nature himself. So A is incorrect. B, ambivalence toward. This seems to be correct because ambivalence means mixed feelings, which reflects what he says in the next part of the sentence, by honoring the centrality of nature while also distaste being in nature, wilderness settings himself. So B seems to be the correct choice. C, renunciation of. This is incorrect because renunciation of would imply that he gives up on nature, but clearly it shows that he still likes nature to some degree. So C is incorrect. D, mastery over. Mastery over means that he would control nature, but this is clearly incorrect. So B is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? Choices are A, predatory, B, obscure, C, diverse, and D, localized. Some scientists have suggested that mammals in the Mesozoic era were not a very blank group, but paleontologist Zhi Luo's research suggests that early mammals living in the shadow of dinosaurs weren't all ground-dwelling insectivores. Fossils of various plant-eating mammals have been found in China, including species like Velodon diplomus, which Luo says could glide like a flying squirrel. So, choice A says predatory. This is incorrect because the context of this doesn't fit with the choice predatory, because it says here that all early mammals living shadow dinosaurs weren't all ground-dwelling insectivores. So instead it shows a contrast that these animals in these Mesozoic era weren't all just insectivores. So A is incorrect. B, obscure. Obscure would imply that scientists don't know very well what the early animals in the early Mesozoic era were like, but this is incorrect because clearly they do know many things. C, diverse. This seems to be correct because in the context it makes sense, where it says that the early mammals living in the shadow dinosaurs weren't all ground-dwelling insectivores. And the second sentence goes on to discuss a specific species that was very unique, showing how these animals weren't just like one type. So C seems to be the correct answer. D, localized. Localized doesn't make sense here because it would imply that the animals living in the Mesozoic era were a localized group, or that they lived in one area, but clearly the text doesn't show this. So C is the correct answer. Which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? Choices are A, prevail, B, succumb, C, diverge, and D, intersect. Critics have asserted that fine art and fashion rarely blink in a world where artists create timeless works for exhibition and designers periodically produce new styles for the public to buy. Luciano Shoshone Bannock, beadwork artist and designer Jamie Ukuma, challenges this view. Her work can be seen at the Metropolitan Art Museum of Art and purchased through her online boutique. Choice A, prevail. This is incorrect because prevail would imply that fine art and fashion rarely prevail or last, but here it can be seen that her art and fashion can be seen in a museum of art and purchased through her online boutique. So A is incorrect. B, succumb. Succumb would imply that the fine art and fashion rarely surrender, but this simply doesn't make sense. So B is incorrect. C, diverge. This is incorrect because this would imply that fine art and fashion rarely diverge, but in the context of this text, that doesn't follow what the text is saying. So C is incorrect. D, intersect. This seems to be correct because in the context, it's saying that fine art and fashion rarely intersect, but these two artists and fashion designers go against this view, and their art can be seen in a museum of art and purchased through their online boutique. So D is the correct answer. Which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? Choices are A, disorienting, B, tenuous, C, nuanced, and D, unoriginal. The author's claim about the relationship between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens is blank, as it fails to account for several recent archaeological discoveries. To be convincing, his argument would need to address recent finds of additional hominid fossils, such as the latest Denisovan species and Homo longi. A. Disorienting. This is incorrect because disorienting would imply that the claim is hard to grasp or understand, but the text doesn't say anything about the claim being hard to grasp or understand. So A is incorrect. B. Tenuous. Tenuous makes sense here because it implies that the claim lacks substance, which it does because it fails to account for several recent archaeological discoveries. So B could be the correct answer. C. Nuanced. Nuanced is incorrect because it implies that the claim lacks precision, which it doesn't. So C is incorrect. D. Unoriginal. Unoriginal is incorrect because the claim doesn't lack originality, and nowhere in the text does it say that. It just says that it fails to account for several recent archaeological discoveries. So D is incorrect, and B is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? Choices are A. Unobtrusive, B. Concealed, C. Approximate, and D. Peripheral. The province of Choconcho was situated on the Pacific coast, hundreds of kilometers southeast of Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztec Empire. Because Choconcho's location within the empire was so blank, cacao and other trade goods produced there could reach the capital only after a long overland journey. Choice A. Unobtrusive. Unobtrusive is incorrect here because unobtrusive would imply that Choconcho's location of the empire did not attract attention, but in the text it doesn't mention that it didn't attract attention, so A is incorrect. B. Concealed. Concealed would imply that Choconcho's location was hidden or wasn't very well known, but this is incorrect because nothing in the text highlights this. C. Approximate. Approximate would mean that Choconcho's location wasn't very well known and that they didn't really know where it was. But this is incorrect because they know it right here, hundreds of kilometers southeast of Tenochtitlan. So C is incorrect. D. Peripheral. Peripheral implies that Choconcho's location was far away on the edge, and this is correct because the rest of the sentence, cacao and other trade goods produced there could reach the capital only after a long overland journey. Because this emphasizes how it would take a long time to get to the capital, D is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? Choices are A. Pragmatic, B. Controversial, C. Extensive, and D. Universal. Ofelia Zepeda's contributions to the field of linguistics are blank. Her many accomplishments include working as a linguistics professor and bilingual poet, authoring the first Tohono O'odham grammar book, and co-founding the American Indian Language Development Institute. Choice A says pragmatic. This is incorrect because pragmatic implies that her contributions only relate to practical matters, but it's seen clearly that her accomplishments include more than just practical matters. It includes more intelligent artistic matters as well. So A is incorrect. B. Controversial. This is incorrect because her contributions weren't controversial. They didn't arouse any debate or doubts. Clearly seen when she worked as a linguistics professor, bilingual poet. She wrote a grammar book and co-founded the American Indian Language Development Institute. So B is incorrect. C. Extensive. This seems to be correct because extensive implies that her contributions were very considerable and to a great extent. And this is correct, seen in the rest of the sentence where it lists out her accomplishments. So C seems to be the correct answer. D. Universal. This is incorrect because this implies that her contributions were universal to the field in linguistics. This is incorrect because her contributions to the field of linguistics was limited to only American Indian languages, not to the whole field of linguistics. So D is incorrect and C is the correct answer. Based on the text, how does the Lord Chancellor respond to the crowd? The following text is adapted from Lewis Carroll's 1889 satirical novel Sylvie and Bruno. A crowd has gathered outside a room belonging to the warden, an official who reports to the Lord Chancellor. One man, who was more excited than the rest, flung his hat high into the air and shouted, as well as I could make out, "Hoorah for the subwarden!" Everybody roared, but whether it was for the subwarden or not did not clearly appear. Some were shouting bread, and some taxes, but no one seemed to know what it was they really wanted. All this I saw from the open window of the warden's breakfast saloon, looking across the shoulder of the Lord Chancellor. What can it all mean? He kept repeating to himself. I never heard such shouting before, and at this time of the morning too, and with such unanimity. So option A says, he asks what the meaning of the crowd's shouting, even though he claims to know what the crowd wants. This is incorrect because although he asks for what the crowd's shouting means, he doesn't claim to know what the crowd wants. So A is incorrect. B. He indicates a desire to speak to the crowd, even though the crowd has asked to speak to the subordinate. This is incorrect because the Lord Chancellor never said that he wanted to speak to the crowd. So B is incorrect. C. He expresses sympathy for the crowd's demands, even though the crowd's shouting annoys him. This is incorrect because the text never says that the Lord Chancellor expressed sympathy for the crowd's demands, and it isn't clearly stated that the crowd's shouting annoys him. It just causes him to repeat, what can it all mean? So C is incorrect. And D. He describes the crowd as being united, even though the crowd clearly appears otherwise. This is correct because he says here, and with such unanimity, but up here in the first paragraph it says that everybody roared, but whether it was for the subordinate or not did not clearly appear. Some were shouting bread and some taxes, but no one seemed to know what it was they really wanted. So the crowd is clearly not unanimous, but the Lord Chancellor describes them as being unanimous. So D is the correct choice. Which finding, if true, would most directly support the student's claim? Born in 1891 to a Quechua-speaking family in the Andes Mountains of Peru, Martin Chamby is today considered to be one of the most renowned figures of Latin American photography. In a paper for an art history class, a student claims that Chamby's photographs have considerable ethnographic value. In his work, Chamby was able to capture diverse elements of Peruvian society, representing his subject with both dignity and authenticity. So option A says Chamby took many commissioned portraits of wealthy Peruvians, but he also produced hundreds of images carefully documenting the peoples, sites, and customs of indigenous communities of the Andes. This seems to be correct because the student's claim is that Chamby's photographs have considerable ethnographic value. And option A demonstrates how Chamby documented the diverse elements of Peruvian society. So A seems to be correct. B. Chamby's photographs demonstrate a high level of technical skill, as seen in his strategic use of illumination to create dramatic light and shadow contrast. This is incorrect because the student's claim is that the photographs have considerable ethnographic value, not that Chamby's photographs demonstrated high level of technical skill. So B is incorrect. C. During his lifetime, Chamby was known and celebrated both within and outside his native Peru, as his work was published in places like Argentina, Spain, and Mexico. This is incorrect for the same reason as B, because C does not focus on Chamby's photographs having considerable ethnographic value. So C is incorrect. D. Some of the peoples and places Chamby photographed had long been popular subjects for Peruvian photographers. This is incorrect because this, like B and C, doesn't focus on Chamby's photographs having considerable ethnographic value. Instead, this focuses on popular subjects for Peruvian photographers. So D is incorrect, meaning that the correct choice is A. Which quotation from the interviews best illustrates the journalist's claim? Art collectives, like the United States and Vietnam-based collective, the Propeller Group, or Cuba's Los Carpinteros, are groups of artists who agreed to work together, perhaps for stylistic reasons, or to advance certain shared political ideals, or to help mitigate the cost of supplies and studio space. Regardless of the reasons, art collectives usually involve some collaboration among the artists. Based on a recent series of interviews with various art collectives, an art journalist claimed that this can be difficult for artists who are often used to having sole control over their work. So the claim here is that art collectives can be difficult for artists who are used to having sole control over their work. Option A says, the first collective I joined included many amazingly talented artists, and we enjoyed each other's company, but because we had a hard time sharing credit and responsibility for our work, the collective didn't last. This seems to be correct because it best illustrates the journalist's claim, which is that art collectives can be difficult for artists who are used to having sole control of their work. And it shows this by saying that they had a hard time sharing credit and responsibility for their work. So A seems to be correct. B. We work together, but that doesn't mean that individual projects are equally the work of all of us. Many of our projects are primarily the responsibility of whoever originally proposed the work to the group. So this is incorrect because it doesn't show how art collectives can be difficult for artists who have sole control, who used to having sole control over their work. So B is incorrect. C. Having worked as a member of a collective for several years, it's sometimes hard to recall what it was like to work alone without the collective support. But that support encourages my individual expression rather than limits it. This is incorrect because it shows how our collective makes it easier to work, rather than showing how art collectives can be difficult for artists who are used to having sole control over their work. So C is incorrect. D. Sometimes an artist from outside the collective will choose to collaborate with us on a project, but all of those projects fit within the larger themes of the work the collective does on its own. This is incorrect because it doesn't, like B and C, it doesn't show how art collectives can be difficult for artists who are used to having sole control over their work. So D is incorrect, meaning the correct choice is A. Which finding, if true, would most directly support the researcher's hypothesis? Researchers hypothesized that a decline in the population of dusky sharks near the mid-Atlantic coast of North America led to a decline in the population of eastern oysters in the region. Dusky sharks do not typically consume eastern oysters, but do consume cow nose rays, which are the main predator of the oysters. So choice A says, decline in the regional abundance of dusky shark's prey other than cow nose rays are associated with regional declines in the dusky shark abundance. This is incorrect because it's saying that the decline in the abundance of dusky shark prey other than cow nose rays, which is just saying that the decline in dusky shark's prey are associated with regional decline in dusky shark abundance. This doesn't prove the researcher's hypothesis, which is that a decline in dusky sharks mean a decline in the population of eastern oysters. So A is wrong. B. Eastern oyster abundance tends to be greater in areas with both dusky sharks and cow-nose rays than in areas with only dusky sharks. This is incorrect, and in fact it goes against the hypothesis, saying that eastern oyster abundance tends to be more so in areas with both dusky sharks and cow-nose rays, meaning that the more cow-nose rays, the more eastern oysters. So B is incorrect. C. Consumption of eastern oysters by cow-nose rays in the region substantially increased before the regional decline in dusky shark abundance. So this is incorrect because it's saying that before the decline in dusky shark abundance, the consumption of eastern oyster by cow-nose rays was far greater. So the decline in dusky shark abundance led to a decrease in the amount of oyster consumption, so an increase in the amount of eastern oysters total. So C is incorrect. D. Cow-nose rays have increased in regional abundance as dusky sharks have decreased in regional abundance. This is correct because if dusky sharks decrease in regional abundance, then cow-nose rays increase regional abundance, then there would be a decrease in the number of eastern oysters because cow-nose rays eat eastern oysters. So D is the correct choice. Which finding, if true, would most directly support Parody's argument? In the 20th century, ethnographers made a concerted effort to collect Mexican-American folklore, but they did not always agree about that folklore's origins. Scholars such as Aurelio Espinosa claim that Mexican-American folklore derived largely from the folklore of Spain, which ruled Mexico and what is now the southwestern United States from the 16th to early 19th centuries. Scholars such as Americo Parodies, by contrast, argue that while some Spanish influence is undeniable, Mexican-American folklore is mainly the product of the ongoing interactions of various cultures in Mexico and the United States. So the argument here by Parody is that although there is some Spanish influence in the folklore, it's mostly because of the interaction between Mexico and the United States. A says, the folklore that the ethnographers collected includes several songs written in the form of a decima, a type of poem originating in the late 16th century. This is incorrect because Parody's argument is that Spanish influence was minimal compared to Mexican in the United States. So A is incorrect because it points to the fact that Spanish influence was more. B. Much of the folklore that the ethnographers collected had similar elements from region to region. This is incorrect because this doesn't support either argument, because the folklore being similar from region to region doesn't show its origins. So B is incorrect. C. Most of the folklore that the ethnographers collected was previously unknown to scholars. This is incorrect for the same reason as B, because it doesn't highlight the folklore's origins, and that it was because the folklore was influenced from the interactions between Mexico and the United States. So C is incorrect. D. Most of the folklore that the ethnographers collected consisted of corridos, ballads about history and social life, of a clearly recent origin. This is correct because Spanish influence ended in the early 19th centuries, and this highlights that the folklore was of a clearly recent origin. So This points to how this was because of the interactions between Mexico and the United States. So D is correct. Which choice most logically completes the text? Birds of many species ingest foods containing carotenoids, pigmented molecules that are converted into feather coloration. Coloration tends to be especially saturated in male birds' feathers, and because carotenoids also confer health benefits, the deeply saturated colors generally serve to communicate what is known as an honest signal of a bird's overall fitness to potential mates. However, ornithologists Alison J. Schultz and others have found that males in several species of the tanner genus Rhamphocilus use microstructures in their feathers to manipulate light, creating the appearance of a deeper saturation without the bird necessarily having to maintain a carotenoid-rich diet. These findings suggest that blank. So option A says individual male tanagers can engage in honest signaling without relying on carotenoid consumption. This is wrong for the fact that it's not honest signaling, it could be dishonest signaling. This is because honest signaling is when they eat a carotenoid-rich diet that gives them the deeply saturated feathers, and dishonest signaling is when they use the microstructures in their feathers to manipulate light, creating the appearance of a deeper saturation without having to maintain a carotenoid-rich diet. Therefore, A is incorrect. B. Feather microstructures may be less effective than deeply saturated feathers for signaling overall fitness. This is incorrect because feather microstructures help to convey a deeper saturation of colors, so this sentence itself does not make sense. So B is incorrect. C. Scientists have yet to determine why tanagers have a preference for mates with colorful appearances. This is incorrect because scientists do know why, and that's because with more colorful appearances means that the bird is more fit because they have eaten more carotenoids. So C is incorrect. And D. A male tanager's appearance may function as a dishonest signal of the individual's overall fitness. This is correct because a dishonest signal is when they use the microstructures in their feathers to manipulate light, creating the appearance of deeper saturation without having to eat a carotenoid-rich diet. Therefore, D is correct. Which choice most logically completes the text? Among social animals that care for their young, such as chickens, macaw monkeys, and humans, newborns appear to show an innate attraction to faces and face-like stimuli. Elizabetta Versace and her colleagues use an image of 3 black dots arranged in the shape of eyes and a nose or mouth to test whether this trait also occurs in testudo tortoises, which live alone and do not engage in parental care. They found that tortoise hatchlings showed a significant preference for the image, suggesting that blank. So, choice A says, face-like stimuli are likely perceived as harmless by newborns of social species that practice parental care, but as threatening by newborns of solitary species without parental care. This is incorrect because of the testudo tortoise example, where testudo tortoises do not engage in parental care, but their hatchlings show a significant preference for the image of faces or face-like stimuli. Therefore, A is incorrect. B. Researchers should not assume that an innate attraction to face-like stimuli is necessarily an adaptation related to social interaction or parental care. This seems to be correct because both the newborns with parental care and the newborns without parental care show a significant preference for the image, meaning that this trait is not an adaptation related to social interaction or parental care. So B seems as the correct choice. C. Researchers can assume that the attraction to face-like stimuli that is seen in social species that practice parental care is learned rather than innate. This is incorrect because of the testudo tortoise example, where although the testudo tortoises did not engage in parental care, their tortoise hatchling had a significant preference for the image of a face or face-like stimuli. Therefore, C is incorrect. D. Newly hatched testudo tortoises show a stronger preference for face-like stimuli than adult testudo tortoises do. This is incorrect, but it's not related to the text, where the text is mostly about hatchlings, not adult tortoises. So D is incorrect, meaning the correct choice is B. Which choice most logically completes the text? The increased integration of digital technologies throughout the process of book creation in the late 20th and early 21st centuries lowered the cost of book production, but those decreased costs have been most significant in the manufacturing and distribution process, which occurs after the authoring, editing, and design of the book are complete. This suggests that in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, blank. So option A says, digital technologies made it easier than it had been previously for authors to write very long works and get them published. This is incorrect because the text doesn't focus on authors writing works and getting them published. It focuses more so on the cost of book production. So A is incorrect. B. Customers generally expected the cost of books to decline relative to the cost of other consumer goods. This is incorrect because in the text it doesn't mention anything about customers and their expectance of books to decline in cost relative to any other goods. So B is incorrect. C. Publishers increased the variety of their offerings by printing more unique titles, but also printed fewer copies of each title. This, like B and A, is not mentioned in the text, and therefore is incorrect. D. The costs of writing, editing, and designing a book were less affected by the technologies used than were the costs of manufacturing and distributing a book. This is correct because it says right here that the lowered cost of book production, but those decreased costs have been most significant in the manufacturing and distribution process, which occurs after the authoring, editing, and design of the book are complete. Therefore, D is the correct answer. What choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? When external forces are applied to common glass made from silicates, energy builds up around minuscule defects in the material, resulting in fractures. Recently, engineer Erika Frankfurt of Tampere University in Finland used the chemical blank to make a glassy solid that can withstand higher strain than silicate glass can before fracturing. So one of the key aspects here is that the phrase compound aluminum oxide is a restrictive appositive, meaning that it's a noun phrase that describes the word before it, and therefore it doesn't need any punctuation. So A, B, and C are wrong because they all include punctuation. Therefore D is correct because no punctuation is needed here. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? In many of her landscape paintings from the 1970s and 1980s, Lebanese-American artist Atel Adnan worked to capture the essence of California's fog-shrouded Mount Tamalpais region through abstraction, using splotches of color to represent the area's features. Interestingly, the triangle represented the mountain itself, blank, among the few defined figures in her paintings. A. R. This is incorrect because the plural verb are doesn't agree with the singular subject triangle. So A is incorrect. B. Have been. This is incorrect because the plural verb have been doesn't agree with the singular subject triangle. So B is incorrect. C. Were. This is incorrect because the plural verb were doesn't agree with the singular subject triangle. D. Is. This is correct because the singular verb is agrees with the singular verb triangle. So D is the correct choice. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? Stomata, tiny pore structures in a leaf that absorb gases needed for plant growth, open when guard cells surrounding each pore swell with water. In a pivotal 2007 article, Plant Cell Blank showed that lipid molecules called phosphatidylinositol phosphates are responsible for signaling guard cells to open stomata. So a key aspect here is that there is no punctuation needed to separate the proper noun Yuri Lee from the title Plant Cell Biologist. Therefore, A, B, and D are incorrect because they all include some form of punctuation. But C is correct because it has no punctuation. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? Researchers studying magnetosensation have determined why some soil-dwelling roundworms in the southern hemisphere move in the opposite direction of Earth's magnetic field when searching for blank. In the northern hemisphere, the magnetic field points downward into the ground, while in the southern hemisphere, it points up toward the surface and away from worms' food sources. So choice A says food, colon. This seems to be correct because a colon can be used to explain information that has come before it. So A seems to be the correct answer. B, food, comma. This is incorrect because a comma can't be used to connect two independent clauses in this manner, and this results in a comma splice. So B is incorrect. C, food, while. This is incorrect because while can't be used to connect two independent clauses without a comma. D, food. This is incorrect because this results in a run-on sentence. So the correct answer is A. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? Researchers studying the Terracotta Army, the thousands of life-size statues of warriors found interred near the tomb of Emperor Qin Shi Huang of China, were shocked to realize that the shape of each statue's ears, like the shape of each person's ears, blank unique. A. R. This is incorrect because the plural verb are doesn't agree with the singular subject, the shape. So A is incorrect. B. Is. This seems to be correct because the singular verb is agrees with the singular subject, the shape. So B seems to be the correct answer. C. Were. This is incorrect because the plural verb were doesn't agree with the singular subject, the shape. So C is incorrect. D. Have been. This is incorrect because the plural verb have been doesn't agree with the singular subject, the shape. So D is incorrect, meaning the correct answer is B. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? In 1943, in the midst of World War II, mathematics professor Grace Hopper was recruited by the U.S. military to help the war effort by solving complex equations. Hopper's subsequent career would involve more than just blank. As a pioneering computer programmer, Hopper would help usher in the digital age. A. Equations, comma, though, semicolon. This seems to be correct because the comma properly separates the independent clause from the phrase that modifies it, though, and the semicolon properly elaborates on the information in the beginning of the sentence. B. Equations, comma, though, comma. This is incorrect because the comma after though results in a comma splice, where it attempts to connect two independent clauses, so B is incorrect. C. Equations, period, though, comma. This C attempts to split the sentence into two sentences, but it illogically places though in the second part of the sentence, whereas it should be placed in the first sentence, so C is incorrect. D. Equations, though. This is incorrect because this would result in a run-on sentence, where there needs to be some sort of punctuation to separate the two independent clauses, so D is incorrect, and the correct answer is A. Which choice completes the text with the most logical transition? Earth's auroras, colorful displays of light seen above the northern and southern poles, result, broadly speaking, from the sun's activity. Blank. The sun releases charged particles that are captured by Earth's magnetic field and channeled toward the poles. These particles then collide with atoms in the atmosphere, causing the atoms to emit auroral light. A. Specifically. This seems to be correct because the first sentence discusses general information about Earth's auroras, while the second sentence goes into specifics about the sun's activity and how it causes Earth's auroras. So A seems to be the correct answer. B. Similarly. This is incorrect because this implies that the second sentence will discuss information that is similar to the broad information about Earth's auroras in the first sentence, but this is not the case, because the second sentence goes into specifics about Earth's auroras discussed in the first sentence. So B is incorrect. C. Nevertheless. This is incorrect because this implies that there is a contrast between the first and second sentence, which is not the case, where the second sentence goes into specifics of the information in the first sentence. So C is incorrect. D. Hence. This is incorrect because this implies that the information in the second sentence results from the information in the first sentence, but this is not the case, where the second sentence goes into specifics about the information introduced in the first sentence. So the correct answer is A. Specifically. Which choice completes the text with the most logical transition? Some members of the U.S. Supreme Court have resisted calls to televise the court's oral arguments, concerned that the participants would be tempted to perform for the cameras, and thus lower the quality of the discourse. Blank. The justices worry that most viewers would not even watch the full deliberations, only short clips that could be misinterpreted and mischaracterized. A. However, this is incorrect because this implies that the information in the second sentence contrasts the information in the first sentence, but the information in the second sentence adds another reason or detail that supports the claim in the first sentence. So A is incorrect. B. Additionally, this seems to be correct because of the second sentence added a reason that supports the claim in the first sentence, so B seems to be correct. C. In comparison. This implies that the information in the second sentence will be compared to the information in the first sentence, but this is incorrect because the second sentence does not compare to the information in the first sentence. D. For example. This is incorrect because this implies that the second sentence will illustrate the claim in the first sentence, but the second sentence doesn't illustrate the claim in the first sentence. So D is incorrect. And the correct answer is B, additionally. Which choice completes the text with the most logical transition? The more diverse and wide-ranging an animal's behaviors, the larger and more energy-demanding the animal's brains tend to be. Blank. From an evolutionary perspective, animals that perform only basic actions should allocate fewer resources to growing and maintaining brain tissue. The specialized subtypes of ants within colonies provide an opportunity to explore this hypothesis. A. Subsequently. This is incorrect because subsequently implies that the information in the second sentence occurs in a chronological order. This is incorrect because information in the second sentence is based on the information in the first sentence. So A is incorrect. B. Besides. This is incorrect because it implies that the information in the second sentence establishes a separate point from the information in the first sentence, but this is not the case. C. Nevertheless. Nevertheless implies that the information in the second sentence is in spite of what was discussed in the first sentence, but this is not the case. C. D. Thus. This seems to be correct because thus implies that the information in the second sentence is based off the information in the first sentence, which is true because the claim in the first sentence is that the larger and more energy demanding the animal brains tend to be when the animal has more diverse and wide-ranging actions, and that because of this, animals that perform only basic actions should allocate fewer resources to growing and maintaining brain tissue. So D is the correct answer. The student wants to emphasize the duration and purpose of Cohen's and Rodriguez's work. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this goal? While researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. The Gullah are a group of African Americans who have lived in parts of the southeastern United States since the 18th century. Gullah culture is influenced by West African and Central African traditions. Louis Miller Cohen is a Gullah historian, storyteller, and preservationist. She founded the Gullah Museum of Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, in 2003. Vermel Rodriguez is a Gullah historian, artist, and preservationist. She founded the Gullah Museum of Georgetown, South Carolina, in 2003. A. At the Gullah Museums in Hilton Head Island and Georgetown, South Carolina, visitors can learn more about the Gullah people who have lived in the region for centuries. This is incorrect because while it establishes the purpose of Cohen's and Rodriguez's work, it doesn't emphasize the duration. So A is incorrect. B. Louis Miller Cohen and Vermel Rodriguez have worked to preserve the culture of the Gullah people who have lived in the United States since the 18th century. This is incorrect because it establishes the purpose of Cohen's and Rodriguez's work, but like A, it doesn't emphasize the duration. So B is incorrect. C. Since 2003, Louis Miller Cohen and Vermel Rodriguez have worked to preserve Gullah culture through their museum. This seems to be correct because it emphasizes the purpose, which is to preserve Gullah culture through their museums, and the duration since 2003. So C seems to be the correct answer. D. Influenced by the traditions of West and Central Africa, Gullah culture developed in parts of the southeastern United States in the 18th century. This is incorrect because it does not emphasize the duration or the purpose of Cohen and Rodriguez's work. So D is incorrect, meaning the correct answer is C. The student wants to emphasize the aim of the research study. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this goal? While researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. The factors that affect clutch size, the number of eggs laid at one time, have been well studied in birds, but not in lizards. A team led by Shea Mary of Tel Aviv University investigated which factors influence lizard clutch size. Mary's team obtained clutch size and habitat data for over 3,900 species and analyzed the data with statistical models. Larger clutch size was associated with environments in higher latitudes that have more seasonal change. Lizards in high latitude environments may lay larger clutches to take advantage of shorter windows of favorable conditions. A. Researchers wanted to know which factors influence lizard egg clutch size because such factors have been well studied in birds but not in lizards. This seems to be correct because the student wants to emphasize the aim of the research study, and it clearly shows here that the aim was to research which factors influence lizard egg clutch size. So A seems to be correct. B. After they obtained data for over 3,900 lizard species, researchers determined that larger clutch size was associated with environments in higher latitudes that have more seasonal change. This is incorrect because this presents the conclusions or findings of the research study, not the aim of the research study. C. We now know that lizards in higher latitude environments may lay larger clutches to take advantage of shorter windows of favorable conditions. This is incorrect for the same reason as B, because it presents the conclusions of the study, not the aim of the study. D. Researchers obtained clutch size and habitat data for over 3,900 lizard species and analyzed the data with statistical models. This is incorrect because this presents the method they used to find the conclusions of the study, not the aim of the research study. So the correct answer is A.